Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kevin Lee Social. Thank you for tuning in. What initially began as an 8-part series interviewing entrepreneurs to share and inspire how they've successfully pivoted during COVID-19, I have decided not only to continue this series, but also to expand on the scope to understand and learn about people's craft, philosophy, the challenges they face in the industry, and their favorite failures that have helped shape them to become who they are today. By going deeper and understanding different thought leaders, businesses, and industries, the idea is to help cross-pollinate ideas applicable in your life and inspire action in this new norm we live in. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Before we get on with the show, today's podcast is sponsored by Altitude Tea. Altitude Tea specializes in rare and exotic teas you can't find on supermarket shelves. Teas grown on high altitudes are more nutrient-dense due to the cold nights and misty peaks that slows the growth of the tea plant, leading to a higher concentration of aromatic oils and richer flavors. They are located in Waterloo and they do private tea ceremonies where you can learn how to drink tea mindfully using a traditional gongfu set and have over 20 varieties of tea to choose from. For our listeners, you can use the code BEYOND at checkout for 15% off. Today we have Ben Lai. He's the director and founder of Sales Ethos, with 15 years experience in sales training and coaching. Ben's vision is to empower you to sell ethically and effectively. With a background in nursing, he brings a unique people-focused perspective to the sales profession. Everyone, please help me welcome Ben. Hi Ben, how are you today?
Hey, good, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show.
Alright. I wanted to begin with your journey. How did you go from being a nurse to starting Sales Ethos?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was young, I always had the long-term goal of being a professional speaker. And initially I thought maybe I'll be a church pastor. But when I got into high school and university deciding what to do, I had no idea how to become a professional speaker. So then I just chose the next best thing, which was nursing. And what I loved about that was the idea of caring for people for a living. But a couple of years into that, realized I've got that lifelong dream. So that was when I made the jump into sales. And it was terrifying, but it was heading in the right direction.
And I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper in terms of the jump between nursing to sales. Was there an opportunity? Did you come up with an idea to start Sales Ethos, or did you go into a different company and then eventually go into Sales Ethos?
Yeah, that was an interesting point, actually, because I was reading a lot of books at the time about how to start a business. And I only realized after reading those books that selling was one of those essential skills that I would need as a business owner. So it's just purely out of necessity. And I thought, what better way to learn the skill than to actually get a job in there? And yeah, completely without any experience, just from what I've read and what I've seen on YouTube videos, I went into the profession. And the progression from there into Sales Ethos came when I was working for a company that was very unethical in its sales practices. And that was when I decided to break off and create this company to really change and influence the sales profession so that it becomes more ethical and looks after the clients that they're serving.
So being Christian and coming from nursing and then going into sales, I can see the strong integrity of wanting to make it a more ethical field and ethical space. What was one of your favorite books from memory that you were studying?
Look,
sales?
I mean, in order to be in this business, you have to read a lot of books.
Yes.
But I'll have to say, the one that I keep coming back to over and over again is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you look at every single one of the principles, they apply so directly into the sales profession. But they have universal application because it wasn't written for salespeople. It was written for everybody. To be goal-oriented, to prioritize based on your goals, to allow yourself to have rest, listening skills. Those are really important for professional salespeople. Absolutely love that book. I've listened to it about 7 times and I've read through it at least once. So it's a great one.
Great recommendation, classic Stephen. I understand, and because of all your reading and learning, I understand that you're big on coaching, about charging what you're worth. Why do you think entrepreneurs undercharge for their services?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a lot of contributing factors, but one of the major ones is the way that we are brought up. One thing that I've noticed is that people who have had parents in the entrepreneurial space generally don't have a problem with charging what they're worth. Usually the ones who have parents in employed roles and then they were in employment themselves, they're the ones who struggle the most. I think some of the contributing reasons mindset-wise would be just understanding the inherent goodness of earning a profit and that you're not necessarily ripping people off. It may even come from religious beliefs. So there's a lot of verses in the Bible that talks about the rich person can't enter the kingdom of heaven and the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So a lot of these have been taken to an extreme and makes us feel guilty whenever we're charging people for our services. And so to ask these sort of people to increase their prices, it's quite hard. The flip side of that is on more of a practical issue. A lot of people believe that if they increase their prices, their clients are going to leave them for the cheaper competitors. Or that whenever a new opportunity comes up, that they're going to lose the business because they're not cheaper than the competitors. So yeah, it comes from a number of facets, and sometimes it's even just out of not knowing better. My goal as a coach is to find out what the reasons are and help them to overcome those reasons.
And from your experience in that space and your years of experience, actually, what do you see are the key factors that determine how much you can charge?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest factor is ultimately comes down to what the market is willing to pay. So you may notice, I like to go on Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree. Some people will advertise really ridiculous prices for an item. But the thing is, the item is not worth that much unless someone else is willing to pay that price. From that perspective, whatever your competitors are charging, that would be a very strong indicator of what you can charge. But more important than that is the value that you bring your clients and the perceived value. So say, for example, luxury watches, right? You can buy a nice dress watch for $100, but then there are also watches out there that you can buy for $40,000 or $200,000, right? Evidently, there are some people out there who are willing to spend that amount on that luxury watch. So then it's the watch seller's job to help the clients to see what the differences are so that it feels like it's worth that extra investment. Even though I say that the market rates will determine how much you can charge, you can certainly charge above if you have strong enough justification.
Perceived value versus market value. Got it. So it's something I'll review on a little bit more later. In talking about this, just to give people a bit more of a clear idea, I know you used Rolex as an example. Maybe you can share a case study with us about a client who was undercharging, and then what strategies did you help them implement to successfully charge more?
Sure. The first client that I worked with to significantly increase their prices was actually a tradie doing roof repairs. So again, he had a really lovely personality, mindset. He wants to help people out. So he thought he would charge less than his competitors, and he was 50% less. The only problem with that is that he was not making enough so that he could hire other people to actually be on the tools. He had to be on the tools all the time, and he was booked 3 months in advance as a result. So it's no problem with drumming up the business at that price point. But he was working day and night, stressed out. His body was really taking a toll. His business coach at the time told him, you have to increase your prices, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. So then he spoke with me, asked me if I could help him with this problem. I said, yes, we can. And we worked through those mindsets that were blocking him. So the idea that he wants to help other people out, I said, yes, you can absolutely help others, but still make a profit at the same time. And I encouraged him to move up to that doubling his original prices up to the market rates. Not more, not less, at the market rates. But the thing is, we wouldn't have been able to achieve this if his workmanship did not justify it. Now, he was providing really good workmanship. Like he would put guarantees on the work for several years. Whereas the competition, they would do the job, and then 6 months later, when it rained heavily, there would be leaks in the roofs. So objectively, his service was better than the competitors. And so that's why he was able to do that. 2 to 3 months, he was at that new price point, making all this extra revenue, which meant that he could actually expand the business. He could hire people and support their lifestyles and grow the business beyond himself. And the interesting thing was that instead of decreasing the number of clients that he was signing up, he actually increased his conversion rates, which is a funny psychological thing, right? And the principle that comes out of that is that people, when they pay more for something, they tend to value it more. Same thing with the watch examples. So when you pay a premium for something, then you have a bit more of an emotional attachment to it and you take it more seriously. So that was the first major case study. The second one was actually a client in the financial services space. So again, massive value for his clients. He showed me case after case of where he was able to multiply his clients' money. And so I made it my job to help him to multiply his money. And what we did was we brought his prices up to the market rates, which was incidentally doubling. But the big difference in this case was that he had to actually increase it for his existing clients. And that is actually a lot more challenging than with brand new clients. And the reason for that is because we have to take into account the anchoring effect, right? When someone has awareness of a certain price point, they are anchored to that point, and it's very, very hard to increase the price from there. So the challenge there was to be able to communicate the price increase without focusing their attention on the price increase. What we did instead was we created a communication strategy that really focused the client's attention on the value that was brought as a result of the service. And interestingly, once we did the price increase for these clients, they actually took the advice more seriously. Going back to what we were saying about you value what you pay for. And they, as a result, the clients actually got more value out of the service because they were paying more. So it's an amazing dynamic. Money is not such an objective thing. It's a lot of psychology and a lot of subjectiveness that goes into it.
And with that, when you said that you helped them focus more on the value versus the price increase before you did the price increase, how did you guys go about that? What did you do to help shift the focus of the customer more onto the value?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for the financial services angle, it's a lot easier because you can show them objective evidence. You can show them numbers. You can show them return on investment. For other services, it becomes a bit more challenging because let's just say you have two accountants. They provide arguably the same service. So how would you go about proving the value from that? So you, as much as possible, you try to draw things back to the return on the investment, but there are other intangibles that you need to be aware of as well. And so this is where perception of the quality of service is really important. Things like building relationships with people, things like keeping your promises, no matter how small they are. So if you say you'll call at 2 o'clock, you call at 2 o'clock, no more, no later, no earlier. Being able to go above what is expected, providing surprise gifts, for example. So I've got a client who sells chocolates, like premium chocolates. So you buy her chocolates, you send it to your client. It's a surprise. They have increased perceived value. So there are lots of intangible things you can play with as well, but the tangible ones are probably the more solid ones that you should focus on.
Thank you for sharing the strategies. It's good to have a good think about that, I think, especially for the audience listening when they're thinking about their own service or products, how they can go about leveraging the intangible or tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't underestimate how powerful likability, friendliness goes. I just recently put in an order for a piano. And one of the reasons that I bought it from this particular vendor is just because he was really friendly. He just really sounded like he was, he could relate on me. He was a pianist himself and made conversation with me. He made me feel important. So if you can do that for your clients, then you can certainly charge more and justify that price with that extra level of service.
And then one of the next question I wanted to ask you, Ben, was, so salespeople tend to get a bad rap because the integrity part is often questioned. What is your outlook on ethical business and selling?
That's a great question, Kevin. And I think it is very unfortunate that there was a period of time where people were able to take advantage of customers' ignorance. Sales tactics and techniques only really started getting abused in the last couple of decades with advances in research about psychology and as people advanced the sales profession. And so they use all of these techniques in order to manipulate people and essentially make them do things that they don't want to do. And then we've had technology advances. So the phone call, the dreaded cold call that you get selling solar panels and energy plans. So yeah, those are the things that have really caused the bad perception and reputation. But if you think about what selling really is at its core, it's just about persuasion. Right. And if you do it the right way, persuasion can be used for good and it can be used for evil. When it comes to dealing with the negative perception, we have to acknowledge where we've come from and make it our job to earn the trust of the people that we're dealing with. So since we have that obstacle to overcome, what are the strategies that we can put in place to genuinely earn the trust of our clients? And that's quite an extensive subject that I bring my clients through.
You bring up the topic of persuasion, and I think that's Robert Cialdini.
Yes. Love his work.
Influence. And I love to understand a bit more. And for those who aren't familiar with the art of persuasion, are you able to share a little bit about that space?
Yeah, look, Robert took a big risk writing that book because good people can pick it up and use it to help their clients, or bad people can use it and manipulate their clients. It's based in scientific psychology and a lot of studies. And we have to be careful to use it responsibly. Like in the same way that you can use a knife to prepare food, you can also use it to hurt people. Persuasion is a very powerful skill that you can use. So from that perspective, one of the major takeaways is that I find very interesting and entertaining from that is the idea that we tend to like and trust others who are similar to ourselves. And this is something that's programmed in the subconscious parts of our brain. Say, for example, if we travel overseas, we meet a fellow Australian, and we instantly have rapport and trust with that Australian, even though we have no real reason to trust them. Similarly, when I receive requests on LinkedIn, the first thing I do is to check where are they from. If they're from the UK or another country, I generally don't accept their invitation. It's just an unconscious bias that we have. Once you become aware of it, you can make a bit more of a conscious choice as to who you trust and why you trust them. But on the flip side, like from the seller's point of view, that is something that we can use to break down some of the resistance that people have. So when I introduce myself to people, one of the things that I do is I keep an eye out for things that we have in common. So if they have kids, I'll say, oh, I've got kids too. Oh, you're a musician. I'm a musician too. And that's the way that we just kick things off at the superficial level, just to break the ice when it comes to the trust relationship.
I think it's a great start for a lot of people to understanding persuasion, but also building rapport. As you said, it's not about the sales, but it's just understanding, building that relationship between each other before you do anything deeper.
Absolutely. But I really need to emphasize here that you have to come with the intent of helping people, because if you are only thinking about yourself and your commission and you use these techniques, that is pure manipulation. And that is not what I'm advocating at all. We are all here to serve other people and to bring value to them. And if that is not your intent, then you're getting into the territory of being a con person.
Right.
Yeah.
Just changing gears a little, Ben, with the impacts of the pandemic and challenges of the current economy, people are tightening up their spending habits. On the other hand, prices of everything are increasing and businesses are forced to charge more. What are your thoughts on navigating this dichotomy?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Kevin. And I think it's a very difficult one because we have empathy for others having to pay more for other services. But ultimately, we do have to look after ourselves. And this is what I tell the entrepreneurs that I work with, that you can't make yourself a martyr. And to further reinforce the point, I say that even not-for-profits need to make a profit. Otherwise, their ability to continue supporting the people that they're benefiting will stop. So you need to make sure, as an entrepreneur, you need to make sure that you're making enough to pay for your basic needs and to continue running the business and make it worth your while. In terms of what influences the market prices, that is something that's not within our control, unfortunately. That's largely dictated by government spending, and it goes into macroeconomics. So I won't go into that. But on a micro level, from our perspective, because we are not in control of that, we have to look after our margins to ensure that we can continue doing business and continue serving people. And then it is the responsibility of your clients to find ways to afford your pricing. But an interesting thing happens here. And it's that as your prices continue to increase, yes, you will knock out some of the clients who cannot afford your price point. But what that essentially means is the people who continue paying your higher prices are the ones who get the most value out of it, the ones who value and understand the value that you're bringing them. So you'll actually work with better clients the higher your prices go. So that's another interesting event that happens when you increase your prices. So you tend to work with people who get the best value out of what you do.
I'm in a bit of a sticky situation myself. So One of the businesses that I run is called the Mayflower. So it's a cafe that we started up in Darlinghurst, and we had that for about 2 years, and then we opened up a restaurant on the other side of the bridge, also called the Mayflower. But the second place that we opened is more of a restaurant, not a cafe. So one's cafe by day, breakfast, lunch. The other one's a lunch, dinner. And so it's two very different price points. For example, if you consider the average spending of a cafe, it's about $30 a head, generally maximum. Whereas if you look at a restaurant, you're looking at least double that. So you're looking at $60 per head. And so we had this kind of personal brand clash where customers were coming to the new place and they were expecting to pay like cafe prices, but they were getting hit with restaurant prices. But yeah, it was a different product altogether. But we were starting to get complaints about it's expensive. And I'm thinking, like, you wouldn't blink twice if you went to a nice restaurant and you paid those prices. But I'm curious to hear your perspective about this. Do you think it's because they have this mindset that they're walking into a cafe? But I don't know, you're going to a restaurant at night.
That's a really interesting case study, actually, and it really points us back to perception management, right? So I have this equation. Like, I'm a bit of a nerd, right? I like translating everything into equations.
Let's do it.
So people's happiness, when it comes to business, when it comes to life as well, happiness equals perception divided by expectation. Yeah. So the very fact that you called both of your cafe and your restaurant Mayflower means that the expectation is going to be at a certain level.
Yes.
And when the perception is changed, like because of the higher prices, that's where they've become disappointed and where they have that point of comparison. So what I probably would have suggested in that situation is to create a different name for the other restaurant just to differentiate. So in the same way, Toyota had this problem many years ago. Toyota decided to start luxury cars. And when they first started doing it, there was massive market backlash. Nobody wanted their luxury cars because Toyota's not known for luxury cars. So what they did was they changed gears and they created a sub-brand called Lexus. And Lexus was brand new. Nobody had heard of it before. And it's a luxury car. It's backed by Toyota quality. But that helps to make that really subtle shift in their head about the perceived quality of the product. And so that evidently has been a very successful brand as they are still around now. So that would have been just a simple change of name could have made all of the difference in terms of changing that perception and expectation dichotomy.
I've thought about this issue over and over again, and I thought, yeah, in hindsight, we should have just called it something different from the beginning.
Better to learn now than never.
Yes. So yeah, that's been an interesting journey and having to navigate that space. In your perspective, what is one lesson your line of work has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in their life?
Sure. Lots and lots of gems. Sales, because it's a human relations skill, has so many things to offer in terms of learning how to become a better person. And that's one of the major things, that if you want to be better at sales or if you want to be better at business, you have to be a better person. You have to work on your character. You have to work on your integrity. Lots of different qualities there. But I would say that one of the most important things that have come out from learning this skill is the skill to empathize with people. And what that means is being able to understand where others are coming from. And one way to achieve that goal is through this skill called active listening. Now, everybody's heard of active listening, but not many people understand how powerful it really is. And the way that I illustrate it is actually by telling a story about a neighbor that we've got in our neighborhood. He walks his husky around our house, and we have a little Western Highland Terrier. And he likes to be territorial. He barks at everybody, but he especially barks at this guy because he's swearing as he's walking by our house. I don't know what for, but he really just doesn't like our dog. So our dog's name is Flash. And what happened was one day I was fixing our fence on the outside, and he's walking up to me with his husky. He's a really rough-looking character. And he confronted me and he said, "Excuse me, are you the owner of Flash?" And I was actually quite scared. I was thinking, my goodness, is he trying to start a fight? And he accused my little dog of biting his dog through our gate. I have no idea how that's even possible. It was completely irrational. So I started arguing with him. I said, why don't you just walk on the other side of the street? It's this open area. And I said, it's not possible. My dog could not have bitten your dog. And he was getting more and more agitated. But then I realized if I got in a fight with this guy, I know you Kung Fu and other martial arts styles, but even in that situation with martial arts training, 2 against 1 is not a good ratio, especially one with razor sharp teeth. So I knew I had to neutralize this situation. So I switched gears mentally and I thought, okay, how am I going to calm him down? The first thing I did was I asked him some questions. I asked him, what do you think I should do about it? And then he started telling me what he thought. And then I listened to him and I said, oh, okay, so you reckon I should put some boards around there or put something to block that hole? And so he felt listened to. And then I introduced myself. I said, by the way, my name's Ben. And then he reintroduced himself. My name's John. And the whole dynamic just changed. He went from being antagonistic to actually being friendly. And I could see the confusion in his face because on one hand, he's angry with me. On the other hand, I'm charming him. So active listening, if it can neutralize a hostile situation like that, imagine how powerful it would be if everybody used it in their day-to-day relationships. Just listening, and this goes back to Steve Covey's principle about understanding others first before being understood. So if more husbands listen to their wives and understood where the wife is coming from before speaking their opinion and trying to argue about logic, or about listening to kids. When the kid is, so for my children, I have to be more mindful to listen to them and really understand them before I go and reprimanding them for whatever it is. And similarly with sales relationships, with business relationships, bosses to employees, it's the single most powerful human interaction skill that we have in our repertoire, but it's so badly underused because people just don't have conscious awareness about it.
That's like you said, active listening. We often hear about it, but how many people are actually using it, and are they using it effectively? It's a hard one to do.
Absolutely. I just quickly go through the 3 steps because most people are familiar with the paraphrasing part. So that's the single most important part of active listening.
Yes.
But the other 2 components are actually giving undivided attention. So making sure there are no distractions, you give the eye contact, you use all your body language to give the full. And then after you've paraphrased, then you need to ask a follow-up question. Because if you abruptly change the subject, it's not only does it feel awkward, but it feels like you're only pretending to listen to me and you're not really interested. So follow-up questions are incredibly important for the whole active listening process.
Thank you for the framework, Ben. That's something I have to review again. It's been a while since I've taken a look at that. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
Ben, let's talk a little bit more about sales.
Sure.
Let's talk about sales medium, and maybe more specifically the digital sales medium at this point. So in your line of work, obviously you work with a lot of different clients. What are some strategies, or let's start with basic. What is one of your favorite sales mediums at the moment in terms of, if it's a social website? Yeah, however, whatever.
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn is probably one of my favorite, and it's been growing from strength to strength for more than a decade now. And the reason that it's so powerful is that you can actually speak directly with people that are decision makers for your product or your service. But the disadvantage is that a lot of people have also caught on to this. And similarly to the cold call, a lot of people are using it the wrong way and just ruining it for everybody else. So if you wanted to use LinkedIn, or you want to go back to traditional cold calling, or even email marketing, whatever medium that you're using, my main suggestion for you would be to just take a step back and think in the other person's shoes. What would they like to receive? What do you like to receive? And what don't you like to receive? And the core thing that comes out from every bad sales approach is that it's always self-centric. So if you want to change gears, if you want to sound a lot nicer and a lot more friendly, instead of going in with the expectation that you're going to sign them up for your services, find something of value to offer them in exchange for their time. Because let's face it, time is money. If you're asking for half an hour of their time, that's half an hour they have to sacrifice. So what are you going to give them in exchange for that half an hour that's valuable to them, that they will appreciate and they can use as part of their business to help them progress further in their career? So say, for example, when I used to sell search engine optimization, crowded market, even when I was selling it in those days. But what I did was I offered my prospects, hey, Google is coming up with this new update. It was Penguin back in the day. They have animals for all their updates. So Penguin update is coming soon. I was wondering if you'd like to meet so that I can show you what the update means for you and you can prepare for it. So you can see in that particular approach, it's got nothing to do with me. I'm not selling my services. They know that I was representing a search engine optimization company, but I wasn't going there just trying to sell my stuff. I was offering them something of value that they could use irrespective of doing business with us. So yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best at the moment, but you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, it just simply won't work.
Yeah, I have seen LinkedIn blow up quite a bit in the past, in the more recent times, and I think there's still a lot more potential for room of growth there as well. But like you said, it's got to be done properly. I'm sure I'm not alone here, but we always get these spam messages that come through and you're like, really? Yeah.
Absolutely. The funny thing is, like, some people go to the other extreme, right? So they absolutely don't want to sell anything. So then they go for the relational angle. And then they'll say, hey, Ben, how's business?
Yeah.
And my thought is, what do you want? Just out with it, right? So you have to strike the balance between building relationships and having an objective, a commercial objective.
Yeah.
And I find that offering something of value upfront is the best way to do that.
Ben, how long has Sales Ethos been around for?
Yeah, I've been running this business now for 10 years. Very grateful that it has grown to what it has today, but there's still a lot more.
That's incredible. Running a business for 5 years is a big leap, and for double that time is formidable. Well done, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm very proud of what we have achieved, and but more importantly, I'm really happy to hear the stories that comes out, the stories of impact. Helping those clients to double their prices and just transforming their lives. That's really what we're about.
And how large has Sales Ethos grown? If you want to put a monetary value, you can, or if not, how far has it expanded? Has it expanded states or countries? Which clients do you work with?
Yeah, look, in terms of the expansion, look, we're still a small team. However, because of COVID, people have become a lot more receptive to receiving training online. So I've noticed that Zoom meetings have pretty much become the standard, whereas I used to use a phone for coaching, and otherwise it had to be in person in order to deliver the workshops. And of course, in person is always going to be better in terms of the perceived quality. But Zoom has certainly permitted us to expand Australia-wide. And yeah, from there, we're looking to grow. I do want to focus on Australia just for the time being, because I don't like the idea of leaving my young family in order to do work. But that's not to say that we won't do it in the future.
Running business has always been challenging, but I would call you a success, because running a business for a decade, essentially, and building that from the ground up from your background is nothing short of amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I'm sure it hasn't always been that way. I wanted to hear about possibly a favorite failure that you've had that had set you up for this success later on.
Oh, goodness. That's such an embarrassing question, but one that I'm happy to share, because I would not want anybody else to fall into the same trap. Okay, so one thing about me is that since I was a kid, I've always had the frugal mindset. Now, what that means is that I try to save money wherever possible. And don't get me wrong, okay? When it comes to personal spending, I'm frugal. When it comes to buying stuff for my wife or friends, I'm generous. But personal spending, I'm frugal. I brought that mindset with me into business. And in business, you cannot afford to just live on a shoestring budget the entire time. And it was only a few years ago that I actually was able to self-reflect. Incidentally, that was the COVID period. So I was able to self-reflect and realize you can't run a business on just shoestring. You have to invest, you have to spend money to make money. And that was when I made the decision to actually put some money towards marketing. And I spent way more than I had ever done on marketing, on networking, memberships, and paying people to do stuff for me. And that was where I unlocked a whole new level of potential for scalability, for return on investment. So just remember the phrase, you have to spend money to make money. But there's a big caveat to that, and that is that just because you're pouring money into something doesn't mean it's going to give you the reciprocal value. Now, one of the things about sales coaches and marketers is that they're very good at making promises. They will say, we will help you to double, triple your business in 3 months, for example. But do they deliver? And the number of stories that I've heard of people spending $5,000, $10,000 on these marketing strategies and then not getting any return on investment is just frightening. And it's really, I feel really bad for these people. So when it comes to spending money to make money, you have to monitor very closely what your ROI is. And you have to really check the honesty scale from the marketers. Do they actually know what it takes to turn that website traffic into dollars? So let's just say you're only investing in search engine optimization. You bring the traffic to your website, but your website looks like rubbish. It's not going to convert into inquiries. And if it doesn't convert into inquiries, it's not going to give you a return on investment. So then you need to look at the website's design. You need to look at the copywriting, which is the text that you put there. How persuasive is it? Do you have call to actions? So there's a whole new genre called conversion rate optimization, who helps you to think through all of these different steps. So while you do have to spend money to make money, you have to also be very careful and understand enough about marketing not to fall for the empty promises that these firms will bring. Mind you, there are some really good ones that are really honest and upfront, but just a little bit of skepticism is required when you're listening to these pitches. Just try to understand what the actual process is and all of the conversion points for your potential customers. What's the journey they're going through before they actually become a client. So just be aware of that. And I'm very embarrassed to share about my frugality, but thankfully I've managed to overcome that particular aspect.
Oh, you're not alone, Ben. I'm sure a lot of men out there as well, and it doesn't have to be men, but a lot of people out there have frugal habits. So it's good to associate, and they can go, okay, that can be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's up to us to decide whether we want to keep that mindset or not.
Ben, we're reaching towards the tail end of our recording, so I normally ask our guests a couple of quick fire questions.
Sure.
And so let's start running through some of those with you. Do you have any morning or evening routines that you go through?
My morning routines is not, look, I'm not one of those people that wakes up at 4 a.m. and exercises for 2 hours before getting another hour work of done in the morning. I'll be upfront and admit that. Although the biggest change that I've made to my routine recently is actually giving up my lifelong hobby and addiction, if I'm really honest, video games. So 2 months ago, I deleted my favorite game and I made a decision that I'm not going to go back to it because of the amount of time that it was just taking out of my evenings, which could be spent so much better things. And so I'm in the process of replacing that. So I mentioned the piano. I'm going to be practicing on an electric piano at nighttime. It's going to be much more healthy and helpful for my nightly routine.
That's a good move and a good idea. This is a vortex that sucks you in and
it is.
You there.
And it's amazing, like talking about psychology, all of the gaming designers are fully versed in how human psychology works. They know how to make their games hyper addictive. Just dopamine rush after dopamine rush. They hook you in. It's as addictive as drugs, I'll tell you. And even being consciously aware of that, it took me years and years to actually break this addiction. It's only been 2 months, as I mentioned. But I'm so grateful for it. I feel free now. It's, if anyone else is looking to break their gaming addiction, I can certainly help to provide a couple of tips.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm not alone there. I think there's lots of people who are just addicted to games, but like you said, they've just put so much money and research into it that they've designed it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you have a favorite book you'd recommend?
Yeah, The 7 Habits would be my favorite. So if you're looking for others that are sales, some really great speakers, Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar, very unusual names, but they were absolute giants in the industry previously, but they don't just talk about sales. They talk about all sorts of different life skills. And I owe a lot of what I teach due to the stuff that I've learned from them. Fantastic mentors to have, but sadly passed away a number of years ago.
Yeah. Like grandfathers in the industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Are there any new beliefs or behaviors that have had a positive impact in your life in the recent years?
I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, you have to be constantly changing. And I think just more recently for me, goal setting has become all the more important because we will only really achieve up to the level that we set for our goals. No more and no less. If you don't have a goal, then you'll just achieve whatever random result that you get. But so I guess for me, being able to unlock my mindset as to what this business can bring in and the impact that I can make on people has been a real challenge for me because, like related to the video games, comfort will kill you. Too much comfort will kill you. From a pure physiology level, if you don't have enough activity in your daily routine, your body will break. So the same thing happens in business. If you don't set really ambitious goals and you really get sold on that goal, your ability to achieve more will be hampered by that, and you will become too comfortable in where you're at. So that has been a major mindset shift for me, especially recently. And now I can feel the pressure of, okay, so now this is uncomfortable. I'm setting a goal way above what I've achieved before. It's uncomfortable, but it's a good discomfort. Yeah, so that's been massive for me recently.
And as your goal setting, Ben, do you start with a large goal and then you break it down into smaller goals? How do you do your goal setting?
I think when it comes to goal setting, you must have a mentor, because we are always stuck in our own heads. And even me being a mentor to other people, I still did not realize that I was handicapping myself with my limiting beliefs. It took talking to my mentor, who said, okay, he asked me the question, what's your goal for the next year? And I told him what it was, a certain revenue amount. And then he asked me why. And he gave me a bit of a look, as in, that sounds like a really low amount. And I said, oh, why? What do you think? And he helped me to think outside of my limiting beliefs, because I set that number based on what I thought was possible. But here's the thing about human potential. Humans have been given the innate ability to have unlimited potential. There is literally no limit to what we can do. We can constantly improve and achieve new things. And the only thing that's really stopping us is our own mindset. And the most ironic thing about it is I've actually helped clients with this before, but I just didn't have that self-awareness that I was limiting myself. I helped one of my earliest coaching clients. We doubled his sales results in 1 year. Doubled. So it's a bit of a recurring theme in this business. But all I did was just help him to see what was possible. I hardly taught him anything with regard to sales. Once we set that goal, he was able to progress towards it, and he actually did achieve it, which was fantastic. I'm really proud of him for doing that.
That's incredible work, as always. It's like you said, common recurring theme, sales. But that's often the case. Sometimes we give out advice, right, to people, and then sometimes we don't take that advice for ourselves.
It takes the conscious awareness. Like, just because we know something doesn't mean we are able to apply it. And if you are looking for a business coach, one of their core roles is to actually focus your attention on the right thing. If you've ever been with cheap coaches, so back in my frugal days, I went to see the small business coaches that didn't charge it. And this is what their process. They would say, are you on Facebook? No. Are you on Instagram? No. Are you doing search engine optimization? No. Okay, you need to do all of these. It's not really. Yeah, like the amateur coach doesn't know how to focus your attention on what really counts. But the good ones are the ones who identify, okay, out of all of the things that you could be doing right now, this is the one thing you should focus 80% of your attention on.
Yep.
And this is going to get you the quickest results in the shortest amount of. So yeah, when you're looking for a coach, look for someone who can direct your attention to something that's going to make a big impact.
Yep. For the audience listening, were there any suggestions or particular networks that you suggest for finding business coaches?
That's a good question. I don't think it's really an easy one to answer, because there are plenty of good coaches out there who will resonate with some people and will not resonate with others. So it's a bit of a searching process. And my suggestion there would be to firstly set a budget for a coach. And when you're interviewing them, figure out which ones you have the best chemistry with, and the ones that will challenge, that are not afraid to really challenge you. Preferably if they've had experience in your industry, that's a nice to have as well. But yeah, I think chemistry is probably one of the biggest factors, because if you don't get along with them, it's going to be hard. You're not going to want to follow their advice.
If you could only send one single line of SMS text to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Single line of text. Following on from the theme of what we were saying before, you need to spend money to make money.
Yeah, that would have been a few years before COVID, so you would have got a head start on that.
Yes. If only I had done that much earlier.
Ben, was there any topics that you wanted to cover that we haven't already covered
in this podcast?
No, that's the main one. I think I'm really passionate about helping people, especially with their pricing strategies, because I've been hearing over and over again from my network that this is a pertinent topic, especially with the rate of inflation, but basically to do with sales, persuasion, converting more leads into clients, helping people to be more bold when it comes to selling their services. I absolutely love seeing the impacts that these changes can make in a person's life. So yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. I could talk endlessly about it.
And finally, Ben, how could people reach out or learn more about you?
Sure. Hop over to my website, salesethos.com.au. Put a lot of money into redeveloping it. Please feel free to leave comments. But yeah, I've got my booking link in the contact us page. You can actually book yourself in for a quick chat. More than happy to talk and just see if there's ways that I can help add value to your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this wide-ranging conversation about sales, Ben. So we've talked on so many different levels about sales. It's been fascinating, eye-opening, and I've learned a lot myself already. It's definitely, I suggest the audience to review over and over again. There's lots of gold nuggets there.
Fantastic. No, I really appreciate it. And I just love getting this knowledge out. I think so many people can improve their lives in business, in their relationships, if they learn how to be more effective at persuasion and empathy. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Kevin. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Ben.
For sure. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to the show notes will be available at kevinleesocial.com, spelled Kevinly. Conversely, if you have any interviews that you'd love to recommend, please send it over to kevinleesocial@gmail.com. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Until the next episode.